Hey, no pictures, no pictures, no pictures, no pictures, no pictures. Secret setup. Get the wing covered, get the wing covered.
TSN's Motoring 96 is brought to you by Quaker State, the intelligent oil for longer engine life, and Midas, the way it should be.
This week we're at Mosport Racetrack, and you know, this track is close to 35 years old. And there was a time when it was the premier showcase for both Canadian and international racing. It's still a busy track. But what are we doing here? Well, Jim Kenzie's going to drop by later and tell us why, because this was all his idea. But first, we're going to join another kind of competition between some of the unsung heroes, not only here at the racetrack, but also at your local garage.
Toronto's Island Airport recently played host to Nissan's International Service Technical Competition. This is the first time the competition has been held outside of the United States.
The event today is that the technicians come in here in the morning and they have to go through 4 grueling exercises that test their skills at diagnosing a vehicle, figuring out what the problem is, and troubleshooting it, and repairing it in a certain time frame to quality standards. Okay, while taking care of the car. To get to the competition at this stage, which is a North American area contest, they complete a quiz that we developed here at Nissan Canada. And this quiz was sent out to every technician in North America, okay, including Hawaii. And the top 10 people in each of the regions then go to regional contests, which is hands-on, much like today's. And from there, the top 2 come to Toronto to compete in the North American area contest. The top 2 overall technicians, and plus last year's winner, will travel to Japan to compete in the world contest against the other best technicians from Nissan's distributors worldwide.
The judges look at the technicians for their ability to make the repair, which is, of course, very important. But even more important than that is how they make the repair. In other words, these people have to do the repair by the numbers, by the proper sequence, rather than just sort of taking a shot at it. They are looking to see, do they use the correct procedures? Are they using the right tools? Are they using the safety observations? And even things such as customer-related things. Are they putting seat covers down, or are they protecting the fenders with fender covers and things like that? So the judge is looking at not only the person's ability and grading them on that, but also how they do it.
One thing that's unique that we found is when you keep a bug simple, people don't look for it. And these are all real-world problems that a lot of the technicians have actually found. And we had one technician last year that went through the competition, and he found a burnout light bulb. And that's all it was. And it took him an hour to find it.
It's very, very tough. It's a lot more difficult than the regionals were. They're throwing stuff at us that possibly we've never seen before, or possibly maybe even wouldn't find in the field. It just, you got to be ready for anything.
The whole nature of vehicle technician, not just training, but the actual work in the shops, is very different than it used to be. These vehicles are so complex now. These people are really professionals, and they don't get that recognition that they should. Something like this gives them a bit of that recognition, but it also gives them a lot of self-confidence and self-image, I think. Secondly, from the standpoint of emphasizing the importance of customer satisfaction, it's got to be a big plus for the company and ultimately for the customer.
subject of this edition of Test Drive is Honda's latest Civic. Now, for the longest while, this vehicle was considered the benchmark car in the compact category. However, with time, we've seen other cars equal it and in some areas surpass it. The question is, will this latest generation Civic return Honda to the top of the heap?
Beneath the hood and behind the stylish new nose sits Honda's wonderful 1.6-litre 16-valve single overhead cam engine. While the 106 horsepower and 103 pounds-feet of torque are not class leaders, they do yield better than average performance. Throttle response is quick and the speed builds in fine fashion right up to the red line. And unlike many other lesser engines, this one loves to rev, and it does so without becoming overly noisy. In the run to the 100k mark, the Civic sedan requires just over 9.5 seconds, which is more than respectable, and yet return no less than 7.2 litres per 100 kilometres, or 40 miles per gallon. This is nothing short of outstanding mileage. Matched with this sweet engine is an electronically controlled 4-speed automatic with lock-up converter, 4th gear overdrive and grade logic control. Grade logic is a program designed to eliminate the hunting between gears when climbing a hill and to provide some engine braking when descending hills. The ECU decides which mode is appropriate using a number of different sensors. All the inputs are used to determine if the car is climbing, descending or on the level. Once it has made up its mind, the ECU either downshifts to provide engine braking or holds the gear to prevent unwanted upshifts.
Well, that's the theory, and you know it works quite well in practice with one exception. Just as you're coming to a standstill, if you get off the brake and onto the gas, you catch the gearbox napping. It doesn't know which gear to go into, so it thunks into one or the other. The result, not particularly smooth. It's just a matter of refinement before grade logic truly works.
The longer I drove the car, the more I disliked some of the traits, and so if it were my money on the line, a stick shift is the route I'd be taking. The suspension on the Civic is an area that has been particularly well done. It is fully independent, uses double wishbones and a refined version of Honda's progressive valve gas-charged shock absorbers at all 4 corners. Some changes to the front geometry and a lower roll centre improve straight line stability and cornering linearity. Similar modifications in the rear help to counteract bump steer and minimise the effects of trailing throttle oversteer. The ride comfort is quite simply outstanding considering this is a compact car. Both the big bumps and the annoying small bumps like expansion joints are handled equally well. Most of the credit going here to the compliant spring rates and the shocks. These are particularly good at filtering out the jarring sensation evident in most small cars. When it comes to handling, the Civic again shines, albeit in a limited capacity. The limiting factor are the Dunlop tyres. They run out of traction long before the car runs out of ability. Better rubber would improve things immensely, especially in the wet. One other comment here, and that is that the power steering is too light for my taste. While it provides quite good feedback and on-centre feel, the light nature imparts a somewhat vague feel. The Civic uses front discs and rear drums to stop. As with the Taurus, I immediately picked up on the fact that the pedal feel has been substantially improved, meaning it is now exceptionally easy to modulate. The stops, which measured 112 feet from 80k, were straight controlled and fade-free. The optional ABS fitted to our tester adds the required level of safety. The only comment here is that like every other Honda ever tested, the ABS is overly anxious to intervene. In the wet, this becomes particularly obvious. Again, I don't think the tyres help this situation either.
The reworked interior on this Civic has been done very well indeed. Start with the centre console. The radio sits where it should and the climate controls are very easy to reach. Secondly, this is the only Honda product I've ever driven where I could actually get the wheel up high enough so I could see the entire dash. The only low note, the choice of fabrics. It's going to collect more lint than my brush does in a year.
From an ergonomic perspective, the new layout is a dream. The front seats are well padded, comfortable and supply the right level of support. The door mirrors, despite the fact that they are manual, are easily adjusted and perhaps more importantly, very good at limiting blind spots. Those relegated to the rear will appreciate the extra 33mm of legroom. The standard split folding rear seats add to the practicality and can be locked in the upright position. Furthering the quest for trunk security is a lockable remote release. Two minor quibbles with the interior. First, the interior light is very dim. And second, whenever you select defrost, the air conditioner is automatically turned on. Now this in itself is not a bad thing, except for the fact that when you choose any other setting, the AC stays on. The result is that you end up driving around with the air conditioning on all the time, wasting a lot of money, especially in winter.
I think it's fairly obvious from my commentary that I believe the Civic has regained its leadership status in the compact car market. I like the reworked interior and the refined ride, and true to tradition, this edition of the Civic, well, it's still easy on the old pocketbook.
Unfortunately, most of us don't think of checking or changing the lubricants in the driveline of our vehicle until it's almost too late, until some component in that driveline has failed. Now, if you're real lucky, it'll only be a seal or a gasket and you've got a minor leak. And that's the case with this particular car. We've got a leaking axle seal out at the left rear corner here. So we've got to disassemble the rear axle in order to get the shafts out and change the seal in this particular model. And at the same time, of course, we're going to change the lubricant in this differential. Now, there's other reasons, of course, why you might want to change that lubricant. It should be changed on a periodic basis. However, most motorists don't think of doing that. But there's a new reason why you might want to change lubricants, even if you don't have a problem with leakage or a failed component. And that's the advantage that can be had with synthetic lubricants. So we're going to take the cover off this axle today and talk a little bit about the advantages that can be had and how simple it is to change these lubricants when the car's up on the hoist. One thing you want to make sure of whenever you're changing driveline lubricants is that you don't contaminate the assembly, because there's a lot of dirt and grit hanging around the area. So I'm cleaning off that crevice at the top of this assembly so when I take the cover off, the dirt won't drop inside this unit. Now, the cover's still partially glued on. The adhesion of the silicone gasket material is still holding that cover on. So I've got to give it a little bit of assistance to get it off. And there you can see the lubricant coming out. Now this is a really thick lubricant. It's an 80W90 gear lube that's in there. And that's part of the reason why you want to think about changing this lubricant, because in the wintertime when it's cold, this is being a very thick lubricant, it tends to produce a lot of drag in your driveline. So switching to a synthetic lubricant can really help the fuel economy of your vehicle. The differential is a pretty tough spot for lubricant to perform in, and that's why we need a lubricant called an extreme pressure lubricant, or EP lubricant, because the friction that takes place between the pinion, that small gear in the back there, and the crown gear right here is a wiping type of an action. There's a lot of load between those two gears, and it takes extreme pressure lubricant to lubricate those. Now, the frequency of lubricant changes in the driveline of your vehicle is going to be dependent on an awful lot of factors. First of all, the type of vehicle that's involved. If it's an all-wheel drive or four-wheel drive vehicle, or a vehicle that's used for trailer, towing, snow plowing, or any other heavy-duty kind of usage, you want to think about stepping up the maintenance procedure on those vehicles, changing the lubricant more often. Or for example, if your vehicle, no matter what type, has been driven through standing water at any stage of the game, you want to at least check those lubricants, because they may be contaminated and have to be changed no matter when they were changed last. A general rule of thumb, however, if your vehicle is just used for average conditions, every 2 years you should think about changing these driveline lubricants. The synthetic lubricant that we're going to install in the rear axle of this vehicle has a 75W90 rating, and that can be used anywhere where an 80W90 conventional gear lube came out. Now, how do you get this gear lube in small quantities? In most cars and light trucks, you're only talking about a couple of liters per axle, so you're going to buy bottles like this. Now, in most cases, you can just thread a plastic extension tube onto the nipple that comes with the bottle and just squeeze the bottle, curve the tube in, and squeeze the lubricant in. However, on many installations today, you'll find that the position is such that it's difficult to do that. If that's the case, go to a place that sells outboard motors. I happen to buy this little pump from Mercury Marine Outboard Dealer. What you do is just thread the cap off. This thread drops into the bottle to the bottom of the lubricant and threads right on where the cap came off, and then you pump the lubricant out this clear hose and into the axle or transmission, depending on what you're working on. It's a neat, simple, tidy way to do it, and it works out quite well. It's not a very expensive tool to buy. I want you to think about changing the driveline lubricants in your vehicle and spending that little bit of extra money to put synthetic lubes in, because believe me, in the Canadian environment with all our cold weather, there's some pretty significant advantages to be had by using these synthetic lubricants. Certainly in the wintertime, you're going to realize some significant fuel savings. Till next week, I'm Bill Gardner for Motoring 96.
We're back here at Mosport Racetrack, and as I mentioned earlier, it was Jim Kenzie's idea that we come here, and joining me now off his corner is Mr. Kenzie and his I want to look like Al Unser Jr., but what are you doing here? You're all dressed up in this racing outfit. What's going on here, and why are you so determined to have us come out here?
Well, I've been, I like to say in terms of my racing career that I've had 1 year of experience about 26 times. It's been a hobby of mine for a long time. And earlier this year, Hyundai called and said, would you like to go racing? And I said, what in? He says, how about a Hyundai Accent? I says, well, let's go see if it'll work. What basically we've proven so far is that you can take a pretty good economy car. It was our car of the year in its class last year, and we've got a long-term test going on it, that you can take a car like that and make it into a racing car. And we're having a lot of fun with it.
How different is it from the one on the street?
This is so-called showroom stock racing. We're allowed to change suspension components, so we've got a whole set of Bilstein shock absorbers and springs. We're allowed to use non-standard tires. The tires are wider than are on the street car. We have a full roll cage, a full fire extinguisher system, full safety equipment, a racing seat, racing harness. But the engine is fundamentally stock. It's all torn down and rebuilt according to blueprinted specifications. But the engine, the gearbox, the final drive, it's all supposed to be stock. Now ours is. I'm not vouching for the rest of the cars, but our car is absolutely showroom stock legal.
Normally this is the air intake on a Hyundai. What we've done is we've removed this whole unit here and made a funnel ram air system out of the headlight mounting plate. The wind will hit, or the air will hit at the front here, come through this tube and ram into the airbox here and a top unit up here. And that'll direct it directly into the fuel injection system. It'll just give us a little cleaner air, a little more horsepower. Actually, we didn't have any proper materials to do this. This is kind of an on-the-spot deal. So we actually used a juice can in here and taped it in.
That's racing it.
That's racing. Whatever it takes.
I would say that it's a hobby for all but probably 3 or 4 Canadians. You know, like real. I mean, Scott Goodyear, Ron Fellows, Richard Spinard, Jacques Villeneuve. But for the rest of us, it's a hobby. They get paid, we pay.
There are 3 categories of cars. The top cars are like Porsches and Camaros and so on. There's a second class that has things like a BMW 325 and so on. And then the so-called touring class has cars like Honda Civic and Volkswagen Golf and our Hyundai Accent. Mosport is still, even in professional drivers' opinions, a real driver's track. If you can go fast at Mosport, you are a very, very good driver. It doesn't meet the safety standards for today's Formula 1 and IndyCar races, but some of the greatest race drivers in the world will call Turn 2, for example, the most challenging corner in all of motor racing. So there's still the appeal, even if you're running a 25-year-old Lotus Cortina or a $10,000 economy car in showroom stock. If you can say that you raced at Mosport and did well, there's a real pride in that for anybody who even claims to be half of a race car driver.
There are a lot of smiling faces around the Ford Motor Company these days as consumers rush to purchase the new Taurus and Mercury Sable. October sales yielded a 21% increase over last year. In fact, it was the best month for Taurus since 1989, while Mercury Sable posted its best ever sales figures. Said one Ford official, "Never in my 25 years in the automobile industry have I witnessed such a widespread acceptance of a new car."
After having a couple of minor fixes completed on our Accent, things have been just hunky-dory. The comments from our test drivers, yours truly included, range from enthusiastic to fabulous. One thing is for sure, this is a great city car. You can park it in a space barely bigger than a shoebox, beetle around slower traffic with ease, and yet if a long trip is required, the Accent is up to it as well. All in all, a tremendous amount of fun to drive, and it comes at a price that's not going to break the bank. Now to the numbers.
Midas tip of the week concerns air filters. It's obvious that when you see a filter as dirty as this one is, it needs to be replaced. But there's a secondary thing you need to check for as well during the service life of an air filter, and that's how well it's doing its job. In the case of this diesel pickup truck, when we look closely at the air filter housing, this is the downstream side or the engine side of the air filter housing. This should be perfectly clean on this side if the filter's doing its job, because any dirt that got to this side is going directly in the engine. And we can see some pretty severe evidence that grit was getting past this filter. Now what had happened was there was a fit problem. The filter had actually dropped inside the filter housing and dirt was bypassing it. Now if you ever notice that condition on your vehicle, do two things immediately. First of all, rectify the filter fit, get a new air filter that fits properly, and second of all, make sure you change the engine oil, because all that grit and dirt that got past the filter is going to be in suspension in the engine oil, and it's causing a lot of wear in your engine. Get it changed as soon as possible. That's your Midas tip of the week.
Kenzie's Corner with Jim Kenzie.
These two cars don't have very much in common, but they do both have anti-lock brakes. They're standard on that $75,000 Lexus, and they're an option on this $10,000 Geo Metro. Now, most experts agree ABS is the most important safety innovation since the radial tire, yet the statistical support for this notion is so far not very strong. One U.S. study suggests no impact on crash frequency at all provided by ABS. This report from British Columbia suggests a small but not very significant advantage. The difference may be because in BC it rains more than in most places, and the advantages of ABS are stronger in wet weather. Still, why hasn't ABS helped us more? Well, some critics say that drivers go faster with ABS cars and thereby use up that safety advantage. Well, that's nonsense. If that were the case, we should go back to bias ply tires and not bother wearing our seatbelts. It's more likely a case that ABS is new technology. Many drivers don't know how to use it properly. Some are scared off by the noise and pedal vibration in an ABS system. One study shows that people don't apply the brakes in almost half of all crashes. Now, all this points to an old theme of mine, driver training. First, get ABS on your next car, and second, take some training and learn how to use it properly. Also, learn how to look far enough down the road so you know enough to put the brakes on in the first place. Now, if the car you're interested in doesn't have ABS or doesn't offer it, first berate the salesman and the car company and go shop somewhere else. If GM can make ABS available on this little Metro, there's no excuse for anybody else. And if it comes down to ABS versus airbag, well, remember, on average, an airbag will only inflate once every 175 years. And for a properly belted driver, it adds only 6% survivability, almost none at all for a front seat passenger, and none at all, period, for people in the back seat. ABS can help save lives and injuries for all car occupants. Hey, if it stops one fender bender crash, it'll be more than worth it. I'm Jim Kenzie.
Well, Jim Kenzie is still out there racing his Accent here at Mosport Racetrack. Now, I did promise him I'd hang around to the end, but hey, it's getting dark, it's real damp, and it's getting real cold here, so I think we'll sneak out. And as Jim said earlier, it's not the winning that counts, it's just being competitive and having fun. Well, have fun, Jim, but play it safe, and we'll see you next week on Kenzie's Corner. And we'll see you next week as we continue to bring you more stories about cars and the people who race them and drive them.
While I'm here, though, I will make my final decision on what I think are the best cars and the ones that I can, with a good feeling in my heart, recommend to the consumers. I think what we recommend to consumers is important. How we test them and the tests that we put them through, the results are important for consumers.
TSN's Motoring 96 has been brought to you by Quaker State, the intelligent oil for longer engine life, and Midas, the way it should be.